I was actually the head librarian at the Atwater Library until very recently. I've been involved with the Atwater Library for 5 years. Um, I started as a volunteer. I volunteered for like a few days. And then shortly after, they offered me a part-time position to do cataloging. So that's how I got like formally involved with the library. And then roughly a year later, I had the opportunity to become head librarian. So I was head librarian for 4 years. I read a lot of things. I don't have a specific um, type of literature that I like. I like nonfiction as much as fiction. I read books in French. I read books in English. I read a lot of literary fiction, a lot of mysteries, a lot of thrillers. I read romance. I read historical fiction occasionally. I also read a lot of nonfiction. So I read crime, historical, literary, um, political, biographies, memoirs. I read everything basically. I think the only thing I don't really read is like, uh, how do you call those? Like, I don't know. In French, it's croissance personnelle, but it's like more like spiritual and like bettering yourself type books. I don't read a lot of those. Um, and I don't read a lot of like religious texts or things that have, although that's not entirely true. So, I mean, I do read a varied array of things for sure. So it's called The Red Prince by Timothy Snyder. And Timothy Snyder is an author. He writes mostly historical um, books, basically on Central and Eastern European topics, let's say. And I did my undergrad in political science and history at McGill University. And we had to read this in one of my classes. Basically, the subtitle of the book is The Secret Lives of a Habsburg Archduke. And it tells the story of Wilhelm von Habsburg, who is basically part of the Habsburg royal family. It tells a story that was at play in Central and Eastern European Europe at the turn of the century. His involvement, like during the First World War, towards like mid um, mid 20th century. It's really it is a narrative historical text. So it's really interesting the way it's constructed. So it goes through different phases of Wilhelm von Habsburg's life and really weaves like the tapestry of Eastern European at that time. So the transition from like empires to more like a focus on nationalism. So this book really has impacted me a lot, just in my personal interest in terms of uh, historical subjects. I've always been interested in Eastern European history, as well as like royals and empires and that sort of thing. And I think it's the perfect example of a narrative historical book. So it's so easy to read in terms of like you learn a lot, but also it's told in a narrative style. I read it a long time ago, and I've never reread it actually. but I would recommend it. Like I recommended it to my dad. And as you can see, like there's so many notes inside of it. It's like probably not really fun to read because I have so many notes in all the pages. But I don't know. I think also when I read it, it was the first time I read that type of literature. So I was really blown away at uh, what you could do with that type of narrative, historical um, book, basically. And I was looking through the book again, and there's so many like sentences that I highlighted or that I marked that are so evocative and like well written, and I don't know, like it made me really want to read it again. I will like remember this specific book for the rest of my life, which is weird. And I read a lot. Like I read probably more than most people read. And like to say that like a book that I read, let's say 13 years ago, I can still remember like the subject and still remember how I felt reading it is a lot to say. I mean, it's hard, but for me, I mean, for a long time it was easy because I had to buy books for the library. So I had to know about books. And I can imagine like just being like just a regular person and wanting to find books. It is a little bit overwhelming if you go into a bookstore or like even just browsing like a website like Indigo, for example, or anything new and cool. I've gotten really good at finding interesting books, and now when I buy a book, I almost always like it because I know my taste so well now. And also like for memoirs, there's some authors that blurb a lot of things, and I know that if I see their name and they're like, oh, this book is exquisite, I know it will be exquisite and I will like it. So I try to like find things that are blurbed by authors that I've enjoyed in the past. So that's one strategy. I watch a lot of booktube as well, which kind of like makes me aware of a lot of books. There's a lot of booktubers that just like make videos about books that are coming out this year that you should check out. And I mean, I'm a sucker for that. And then also there's like traditional media news, like the newspapers, like the New York Times, Globe and Mail, any type of like literary magazine or that type of thing. And then people recommend things to me sometimes. So, well, especially working at the library, I had some colleagues that could recommend books occasionally, and patrons. They used to recommend books to me sometimes. So I would definitely check them out if they seemed like something that I would like. George Saunders. It's called A Swim in a Pond in the Rain. And the subtitle is In which 4 Russians give a master class on writing, reading, and life. He won the Man Booker Prize, so he's like a decently known author. And he is also a professor. He teaches an MFA course at Syracuse University. He teaches in the creative writing program. And this book is based on a class that he teaches for the MFA students on Russian short stories. I have always had a regret in my life of not studying literature, first of all, and also I have a strong interest in creative writing and also critical analysis of literature. So this book came at the right moment because it kind of renewed my love of really analyzing writing. So what he does in this, so it's a version of a class that he does. And he goes through 7 short stories by great Russian writers. So the authors are the following. So there's Chekhov, Turgenev, Tolstoy, and Gogol. Each section is dedicated to one short story. The short story is in the book, so you can read the short story. And then he shows you a way to think about the writing and the intention of the writer. The way he writes is really accessible. So even if you're not a literature student, even if you're not a Master of Fine Arts student in literature, you will understand it. He goes through what makes a good story, how the writer thinks and creates the story, and all of this applied to those specific short stories. It's a book that talks about writing in a great and wonderful way that makes you want to go take a class on Russian authors, on Russian short stories. They've reinforced my interests. So there are books that I've read that are on topics that have kind of formed my identity, kind of. Maybe that's a little bit exaggerated, but in the period that I read this book, I was really into politics, really into history. Obviously, I read this for school, so it had to do with my education. But it's still something that interests me and that I keep kind of at the back of my mind. In terms of this book, I think because I was a librarian for 4 years, and basically this is all tied, but my experience working at the library has, on top of all the benefits that I've had from working there, and the nice experience that it was, it really rekindled my love of literature. Because before working at the library, I had basically stopped reading. I would read maybe 3 books a year or something, which for me is unacceptable now. So through the years, the first year I was head librarian, I read let's say 20 books or something. And now we're at half of the year and I read 151 books. So I think it really solidified my love and the fact that I get a lot from reading, in the same way that I think the goal of authors, and maybe this is where this comes into play, there's a goal to everything that they write, and it kind of can affect you in a certain way. And I've definitely been affected by literature that I've read throughout the years, especially in the last 2 years, where I really solidified what I liked And now I read things that bring me so much. So, and this book really brought me a lot, just in the sense that it helped me to like see a different way of analyzing and enjoying literature in general.